It's Yapping Time. Yapping Time presents you a true survival story pulled straight from real life. Today, we dive into the chilling events of a sunny beach day that turned into a nightmare. This is Out of the Water, a gripping account of two horrific shark attacks that unfolded just 90 minutes apart on Florida's coast. Brace yourself for a tale of chaos, courage, and the strength of strangers. A bright blue sky stretched across Florida's Watersound beach, a private stretch of sand in the Panhandle accessible only to one nearby community. It was June 7th, 2024, and scores of sunbathers splayed on towels or under beach tents. The two sandbars off its shore, at 30 and 60 yards out, were dotted with body surfers and swimmers. Among them were Elizabeth Foley, on vacation from Virginia with her husband, Ryan Foley, and their three children, Dominic, 13, Lila, 15, and Laurel, 17, who splashed happily in the shallow waters of the first sandbar. Keith Harrison, a neuropathologist from Alabama, was also at the first sandbar with his two sons, ages 9 and 12, body surfing the short waves. They were at the tail end of a week-long family trip, and for the first few days the water had been a little murky, but on Friday it was crystalline, and they planned to enjoy it. Then came the screams. Dr. Harrison at first thought the screams were from kids playing, but as he turned toward the commotion, he saw a plume of blood spreading in the water. He left his kids with his wife and ran toward it. As he arrived, he saw Elizabeth Foley emerging from the water. Her hand and half of her left forearm were missing. Flesh from her buttocks hung in ribbons, and blood poured from her pelvis. Her three children wailed around her. Her husband held her up. A shadowy figure lurked just behind them in the water, keeping strangely still in the crimson-tinged tide. A bull shark. Dr. Harrison grabbed Elizabeth from her husband and started carrying her toward shore as Ryan wrangled the kids. As he clamped his hand around Elizabeth's left brachial artery, the vessel that supplies blood to the arm, a word sprang into his mind: horrific. Riley Smith, Bailey Massa, and Abby Judeman had spent all morning at Watersound Beach, swimming and sunbathing. The three of them, plus a fourth friend, had driven all night from Columbia, Missouri, for a girls' beach weekend. All were in their early 20s, friends from their medical jobs. Smith was a paramedic, Massa was an emergency room nurse, and Judeman was a nurse for a medical specialist. Under their beach tent, they marveled at how blue the sky and water were. The screams jolted them out of their Friday lays. Smith looked out at the water and saw it turn red. Shark attack, she thought instantly. Her paramedic instincts surging, she jumped out of her beach chair. "You guys ready?" Smith hollered at her friends. "For what?" one of them asked. Smith flung off her sun hat, grabbed a towel, and ran toward the shoreline. Her friends followed close behind. In the water, two men neared the sand. Elizabeth was in their arms, and she was dying. The most threatening species. Of all the sharks swimming in the Gulf, bull sharks, experts say, are among the most menacing. Bull sharks are large, reaching about 10 feet in length, with short, blunted snouts, from which they derive their name. Their upper jaws are lined with large, triangular, serrated teeth used to pull and tear flesh from larger animals. As apex predators, they eat smaller fish and also larger prey, such as dolphins, manatees, and other sharks. When a bull shark clamps down, it thrashes its head and tears off chunks, much like a pit bull terrier, according to the Shark Research Institute. Unlike a blacktip shark, which eats smaller fish whole and would likely leave just small puncture wounds on a human, a bull shark has a bite that is typically much more severe, says Dean Grubbs, Associate Director of Research at Florida State University's Coastal and Marine Laboratory. If it results in a loss of a limb or loss of life, most often it seems to be a bull shark, he says. Bull sharks display an aggressive, almost territorial behavior not commonly seen in other sharks. Grubbs says he has pursued bull sharks in his boat, and they've turned and attacked the boat. Screaming in background. Dr. Harrison and Ryan carried Elizabeth to shore and set her down on the sand. Smith dropped to Elizabeth's right side and pressed a towel onto her mauled pelvic area. Then Smith closed her hands into fists and pushed down with all her might on the crevice where Elizabeth's right leg met her waist, leaning on the severed femoral artery to try to stanch the bleeding. Massa called 911 and relayed details of the injuries. By this time, a man who identified himself as a Navy SEAL had joined them and was putting pressure on the other femoral artery, while Dr. Harrison's sister-in-law, Amy Jones, wrapped what was left of Elizabeth's left arm in a towel. Judeman tried to keep Elizabeth awake. Ryan knelt at her side, praying with her and telling her how much he loved her. Dr. Harrison continued squeezing down on the brachial artery in her arm, trying to control the bleeding. He tried to put a tourniquet around the arm at the armpit, first using a wet towel, then a Croquis sunglass strap. Nothing worked. He continued pressing the brachial artery against the humerus bone in her upper arm. The bleeding slowed, but the towel became saturated with blood. All around them, people, including Elizabeth's children, screamed. Phone calls poured into the county's emergency call center. A log of those calls captures the chaos of the scene. 13-21-26. Shark attack. 13-22-07. Screaming in background. 13-23-07. Hand missing. 13-23-13. People are yelling. 13-29. 1. She is losing blood fast. Alyssa Huffman was in waist-deep water with her sister and her 14-year-old nephew when they heard the screams. Huffman, who had trained as a lifeguard, raced toward the shoreline and was immediately struck by how pale Elizabeth was. Her skin had drained of nearly all its color, and her lips were white. She was still conscious, but she was losing a lot of blood and was dangerously close to slipping into shock. Huffman dropped next to her and cradled her head in her hands. She asked Elizabeth if she wanted to pray. Elizabeth nodded. The two recited the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Each time she noticed Elizabeth nodding off, Huffman rubbed sand on her cheek to keep her awake. Your children are here watching, she told Elizabeth. I need you to remember what it was like the last 5 minutes of delivery. Remember how miserable that was. This is your marathon. This is going to go on for a while. The one thing you can do to show your kids how strong you are is breathe. Huffman led Elizabeth through a series of breathing exercises. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Slow, steady. At 1:34 p.m., 13 minutes from the initial 911 call, 2 emergency medical technicians arrived in a white South Walton Fire District pickup truck. The team lowered a flexible stretcher and, with the help of the medical bystanders, rolled Elizabeth onto it. Then, as some maintained pressure on the femoral arteries, others lifted Elizabeth and placed her in the bed of the pickup. They drove 100 yards to the boardwalk, then removed her from the pickup and carried her on the stretcher up the steps and down the boardwalk, trotting about a quarter mile, hauling a grown woman who was near death. At a boardwalk entrance, they commandeered a golf cart and ferried Elizabeth to a waiting ambulance. Elizabeth was rushed to a nearby fire station and later airlifted to Destin, Florida. Total time from when the first call came in to when the medevac helicopter landed, 39 minutes. To the bystanders who had tried to save Elizabeth Foley's life, it felt like an eternity. No double red flags. The South Walton Fire District oversees 15 lifeguard towers used to monitor its 26 miles of beaches. It uses a warning system with different colors of flags, raised at different beach access points to warn beachgoers of dangers in the Gulf. A purple flag means dangerous marine life, usually abundant jellyfish or stingrays. A yellow flag is medium hazard, for moderate surf and/or currents, the county's lowest risk. A single red flag means high hazard, with high surf and/or strong currents, and swimmers are urged to stay near the shore. And a double red flag means the water is closed to the public. For most of the day on June 7th, the flags had flown yellow, reflecting the Gulf's calm surf and good conditions, and purple, indicating possible jellyfish or stingrays in the water. At 1:38 p.m., safety officials and the sheriff's office agreed to maintain localized area closure around Watersound Beach, according to the reports. That meant that, while some beaches were closed because of the shark attack, for much of South Walton's coastline, yellow flags still flew in place. A second shark attack. 4 miles east of where rescuers were rushing to help Elizabeth, Delaney Quinley Richardson led her soon-to-be sister-in-law's bachelorette party up the boardwalk stairs at Seacrest Beach and into the dazzling beach day. She and 9 other women had arrived the night before to celebrate the impending nuptials of Kylie Kolinsky, her brother's fiancée. They had planned a busy weekend that included a pontoon trip to nearby Crab Island, a sunset beach dinner, and a pajama party with board games. On June 7th, they arrived at the beach at around 1 p.m. Richardson and the rest of the party wore matching blue bathing suits. The bride-to-be wore white. Richardson, 23, a maternity nurse in Mobile, Alabama, had vacationed at that stretch of beach growing up and explained to the group the meaning of the yellow and purple flags flapping over the boardwalk. Yellow means relatively calm surf, she said, and purple means dangerous marine life. Like a shark? One of the women asked. Richardson laughed. More like jellyfish, she said. Maybe a stingray. I've never seen a shark out here, she told them. At around 1:20 p.m., a white South Walton Fire District pickup truck sped west along the beach toward Watersound, its lights flashing. Beyond the boardwalk, Richardson heard the sudden wail of sirens. Likely a heart attack or someone caught in a rip current, she thought. They spent the next few hours splashing in the clear, waist-high surf and sunbathing. Not far from where Richardson and her crew bathed, Lulu Gribben, 15, her identical twin sister Ellie Gribben, and their friends splashed in the surf. The sisters, a family friend, McCrae Faust, 17, and other friends, had traveled to Seacrest Beach from Mountain Brook, Alabama, a few days earlier for a mother-daughter's beach trip. Just before 3 p.m., Lulu, Ellie, and McCrae went into the water and hunted for sand dollars. Suddenly, a shadow moved through the thigh-high water. "Shark!" one of the girls yelled. Ellie and others nearby raced to the shore. Behind her, Lulu yelled, "Stay calm!" Then, screams punctured the air. McCrae was nipped on her leg and foot, but she made it to shore, suffering only minor injuries. Ellie, reaching shore, turned and saw blood spreading through the water. In the middle of the large, red cloud stood her sister, screaming. Stephen Bean was in the water and heard the screaming. He made his way toward Lulu and pulled her away from the shark. As others helped bring her to shore, Lulu was carried face down, arms outstretched, as if flying over the waves. Half of her left arm was missing. She's going to bleed out. Delaney Quinley Richardson, standing in chest-high Gulf water, not far from where Lulu and her friends were, also heard the screams. People ran out of the water in a panic while others screamed or cried. Some vomited on the shoreline and at least one person fainted. Richardson made it to shore and began yelling directions at the crowd. The amount of blood in the water, it had spread to cover a space the size of a swimming pool, told her the next few minutes would be crucial. "I need shirts! I need towels!" Richardson bellowed. "I need anything that you can tie around this girl." People began tossing t-shirts, towels, and boogie board strings in her general direction. When Lulu finally got to the sand, Richardson saw where most of the blood was coming from. Lulu's entire right thigh was gone. Her femur glistened in the sunlight, and blood gushed from a severed femoral artery. "Oh my gosh," Richardson thought. "She's going to bleed out." Nearby, Muhammad Ali, an interventional radiologist from Jackson, Mississippi, and his friend Ryan Forbes, a family doctor from Orange Beach, Alabama, had been standing in waist-deep water, helping their young kids ride boogie boards when the screams blared. The two doctors carried their kids out of the water, then hurried over to where Lulu was being brought ashore. Dr. Ali, a hulking figure at 6 feet, 2 inches, and 280 pounds, knelt next to Lulu and leaned his weight on her femoral artery, cinching it closed. A bystander handed him a ratchet strap used to hold beach chairs together, and he wrapped it tight around Lulu's upper leg, leaning back in the sand and using all his weight to clamp down on the artery. Dr. Forbes checked Lulu's pulse and listened to her heartbeat, ready to start CPR and chest compressions if her heart gave out. Lulu's face was ashen, and her lips had turned white as she flitted in and out of consciousness. "Stay with us. Stay right here," Dr. Forbes told her. "Help is coming." As the doctors worked on Lulu, Richardson turned to a man next to her and pulled the drawstring from his bathing suit. She knelt next to Lulu and wrapped the drawstring around her upper left arm, pulling it tight. Lulu's eyes widened with pain. "Sweet girl," Richardson told her, "I'm so sorry. I know this hurts. It has to hurt in order for it to work." Ellie, Lulu's twin, also knelt next to her sister. She held Lulu's right hand and told her she was doing great and that everything was going to be okay. Then their mother, Anne Blair Gribben, who had been farther down the beach, walked up. She saw Lulu's leg and screamed. Several bystanders had to pull her away. As Lulu slipped in and out of consciousness, Richardson tried to keep her awake. "Sweetheart," she asked, "what's your name?" The girl whispered, "Lulu," closing the beach. Shortly after 3 p.m., a white South Walton Fire District truck backed up on the sand. Paramedics asked Richardson to let go of the towels and the drawstring Richardson had wrapped around Lulu's arm so they could place proper tourniquets around her arm and leg. For the first time since Lulu emerged from the water, Richardson let go of her arm. Then they rolled Lulu onto a board, loaded her in the bed of the truck, and drove a short distance to the boardwalk. From there, EMS teams carried her up 3 flights of stairs, across the boardwalk and to a waiting ambulance. As Lulu was carried up the stairs and toward the ambulance, Richardson rejoined her friends. A group of teenage girls walked up and asked if they could all pray for Lulu. The girls, Richardson and the bachelorette party, held hands in a circle and prayed that Lulu would make it to the hospital alive. Then Richardson walked over to the edge of the dunes and threw up. A few minutes later, she offered to give a statement to a sheriff's deputy. As they walked over to his truck, the deputy mentioned the first shark attack less than 2 hours earlier. Cold chills slid down Richardson's spine, followed by a surge of anger. She looked up at the flags. They were still flapping yellow and purple. The decision to switch all 26 miles of South Walton beaches to double red flags came at 2:57 p.m., 96 minutes after initial reports of the first shark attack in Watersound. At a news conference later that day, South Walton Fire District Chief Ryan Crawford reiterated the challenges of closing all county beaches at once. "There's 26 miles of beaches in Walton County," he said. "Traversing that 26 miles and physically changing the flags takes some time." In after-action reports, officials noted that they had followed both county guidelines and United States Life-Saving Association protocols by not closing all beaches until there was a second severe attack. Fire district officials also noted that the attacks occurred far from any lifeguard tower, slowing response. At around 4 p.m., Richardson and her friends gathered their things, trudged up the boardwalk stairs, and started the long walk back to their rental. A few families were still heading toward the beach, unaware of the drama that had just unfolded there. "They're closing the beach," Richardson told them. "Someone just got bit by a shark." "I made it." Elizabeth was stabilized at HCA Florida Fort Walton Destin Hospital and then airlifted to a hospital in Richmond, Virginia, closer to her home in Ashland. She's had numerous surgeries, including plastic surgery. Lulu underwent a series of emergency surgeries and procedures at Ascension Sacred Heart Hospital in Pensacola, Florida. She had lost 2/3 of her blood, and her right leg was amputated between her hip and knee. When they removed her breathing tube the following day, she looked up at her family and whispered, "I made it." On June 10th, 3 days after the 3 shark attacks, Seacrest Beach, the site of Lulu's encounter, was a sea of blue and pink beach umbrellas, with hundreds of visitors arriving early to sunbathe or splash in the surf. At about 9:30 a.m., several people claimed to have spotted a shark in the shallows. Bathers rushed out of the water and stood on the shoreline, pointing as a large, shadowy figure cut through the clear water. Behind them, yellow and purple flags fluttered in the breeze over the boardwalk, welcoming more visitors to the beach. Thank you for listening to this dramatic story. If you found this true story powerful, moving, or just downright unbelievable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life drama and incredible human stories. Until next time, keep yapping.